Hi, I'm Rashonda Cade. This is Reading with Rashonda. We are reading Behind the Scenes by Elizabeth Keckley. We are on chapter 12. Ooh, chapter 11 was long. Chapter 12 is even longer. It is going to take us multiple times to read through chapter 12. Let's dive in. Chapter 12, Mrs. Lincoln Leaves the White House. For 5 weeks, Mrs. Lincoln was confined to her room. Packing afforded quite a relief, as it so closely occupied us that we had not much time for lamentation. Letters of condolence were received from all parts of the country and even from foreign potentates, but Mr. Andrew Johnson, the successor of Mr. Lincoln, never called on the widow or even so much as wrote a line expressing sympathy for her grief and the loss of her husband. That's interesting. Robert called on him one day to tell him that his mother would turn the White House over to him in a few days, and he never even so much as inquired after their welfare. Mrs. Lincoln firmly believes that Mr. Johnson was concerned in the assassination plot. In packing, Mrs. Lincoln gave away everything intimately connected with the president, as she said that she could not bear to be reminded of the past. The articles were given to those who were regarded as the warmest of Mr. Lincoln's admirers. All of the presents passed through my hands. Why? I mean, I'm not mad at it, but why? Let's keep in mind that Mrs. Keckley is the seamstress for Mrs. Lincoln. I mean, she has dressed dead bodies, she has tended to the sick, she's babysat, she is orchestrating giving away Mr. Lincoln's effects. But let's keep in mind the job she was paid to do, and that to make clothes for the president's wife. This is scope creep if I've ever heard of it. And I think a lot of things about that, but I'm going to keep silent for a little bit. Let's just keep reading. All of the presents passed through my hands. The dress that Mrs. Lincoln wore on the night of the assassination was given to Mrs. Slade, the wife of an old and faithful messenger. The cloak, stained with the president's blood, was given to me, as also was the bonnet worn on the same memorable night. I'm intrigued. I get for posterity, you don't want to wash the blood off, but that's an interesting thing that I assume she requested for herself. All the questions, y'all. All the questions. I mean, would I want that? I don't know. I know she admired the president and but his blood-stained cloak? I don't know. I'm gonna keep reading. Afterwards, I received the comb and brush that Mr. Lincoln used during his residence at the White House. Why does she want his comb and brush? Although she said she received it, maybe it was just given to her. Maybe she didn't request it. What would you want? I don't know. I don't know what I would want, but I feel like not the thing she's taking. I don't know. Oh, okay. Let me keep reading. Afterwards, I received the comb and brush that Mr. Lincoln used during his residence at the White House. With this same comb and brush, I had often combed his head. Okay, now that makes more sense to me. Did we know she was doing his hair? We knew she did Mrs. Lincoln's hair and got her dressed, and we know she did that for the kids. She was doing that for the president too? At least his hair? What? What was this woman's actual job? She was not getting paid enough. I don't know how much she made, but it was not enough for being the personal servant, because that was truly what she was. She was a personal servant for the first family, and no shame in that being your job. I'm not mad at that at all. But that's not what her job was, and that wasn't what she was getting paid for. Maybe that's why this book started off with, I'm no special friend of Mrs. Lincoln. Y'all remember that? Okay. When almost ready to go down to a reception, he would turn to me with a quizzical look. Well, Madam Elizabeth, will you brush my bristles down tonight? Yes, Mr. Lincoln. Then he would take his seat in an easy chair and sit quietly while I arranged his hair. As may well be imagined, I was only too glad to accept this comb and brush from the hands of Mrs. Lincoln. The cloak, bonnet, comb, and brush, the glove worn at the first reception after the second inaugural, and remember, she definitely requested that, the right glove, his handshaking glove, um, and Mr. Lincoln's overshoes also given to me, I have since donated for the benefit of Wilberforce University, a colored college near Xenia, Ohio, destroyed by fire on the night that the president was murdered. Mm, I guess like rude rioters and rioting and looting. Wow, that was difficult for me to say. There was much surmise when Mrs. Lincoln left the White House what her 50 or 60 boxes, not to count her score of trunks, could contain. Um, like, I'm not going to take any stabs at that. Moving is the worst. It is the absolute worst. And I've got so much stuff. I have so much stuff. I get rid of stuff all the time. Like, I am not a hoarder. I get rid of things if they don't fit. I get rid of things if I'm not using them. Nevertheless, I have so much stuff. Now, I do keep things like if I have a good glass bottle for something or like cardboard, I'll keep those because like I can use them for something else. And I'm trying to be cognizant of my impact on the planet. But like just generally, I've got thousands of books. Um, I don't know that I have thousands of physical books. I have hundreds of books, definitely. I've got clothes, lots of clothes. I've got craft supplies, skincare items. I'm looking around. I've got notebooks galore. Notebooks galore. Y'all have notebooks too. It's not just me. I've got technological equipment. I've got sheets. I've got papers. Oh, I hate papers. I've got so many like necessary documents. I just personally, just me, Rashonda Cade, dishes. I've got so many dishes. 50 to 60 boxes, just my stuff would be an underestimation. So I am not mad at Mrs. Lincoln having 50 or 60 boxes, not to count her score of trunks. People are wondering what they could contain. All her life is what they contain. Like I've got pine cones. I had one coworker who was like, "You strike me as a person who has just for no reason a gold sparkle pine cone at home." And I was like, "Obviously, I have a gold sparkle pine cone at home. Why would I not have that?" Like I've got things, y'all. Things. Too many things, trying to rid my life of it. Anyway, that was more than you ever wanted to know about me. Let's keep reading this book. There was much surmise when Mrs. Lincoln left the White House what her 50 or 60 boxes, not to count her score of trunks, could contain. Had the government not been so liberal in furnishing the boxes, it is possible that there would have been less demand for so much transportation. The boxes were loosely packed, and many of them with articles not worth carrying away. Let me add too, if I were to pack up all my stuff, a lot of it would be articles not worth carrying away. Part of me is like, if I have to move, just burn it all and I'll start fresh. Mrs. Lincoln had a passion for hoarding old things, believing with Toodles that they were handy to have about the house. The bonnets that she brought with her from Springfield, in addition to every one purchased during her residence in Washington, were packed into boxes and transported to Chicago. She remarked that she might find use for the material someday, and it was prudent to look to the future. Clothing articles I will get rid of. I am sorry to say that Mrs. Lincoln's foresight in regard to the future was only confined to cast off clothing, as she owed, at the time of the president's death, different store bills amounting to $70,000. Okay, $70,000. Obviously, I'm going to pause here for a moment, look that up, and get back to you. I don't remember what the huge amount of her debt was before, but I feel like it wasn't $70,000. Let me read that. $70,000. And am I mad at being $70,000 in debt? Nope, I'm not. I think it's unfortunate, but a lot of people are in a lot of debt, and I'm not going to exclude myself from the number of people who are in debt because I am, like so many people are. But what I'm curious about is, what is $70,000 back then? So I'm going to pause, look it up. I'll come back. All right, y'all, I'm back. Oh, wait a minute. I looked up $700,000. Let me remove one of those zeros because I was about to fall out of my chair. for how much that was worth in today's money. It's just telling me. Okay, let's look at this calculator. We're looking at the calculator. It really believes I want to know about $700,000, but I really only want 70. Okay, $70,000 in 1865 is worth $1,291,950.92. So like $1.3 million worth of debt to creditors or like stores. That is an extraordinary sum. All right. Mr. Lincoln knew nothing of these bills, and the only happy feature of his assassination was that he died in ignorance of them. Had he known to what extent his wife was involved, the fact would have embittered the only pleasant moments of his life. I disclose this secret in regard to Mrs. Lincoln's debts in order to explain why she should subsequently have labored under pecuniary embarrassment. The children, as well as herself, had received a vast number of presents during Mr. Lincoln's administration, and these presents constituted a large item in the contents of the boxes. The only article of furniture, so far as I know, taken away from the White House by Mrs. Lincoln was a little dressing stand used by the president. I recollect hearing him say one day, "Mother, this little stand is so handy and suits me so well that I do not know how I shall get along without it when we move away from here." He was standing before a mirror brushing his hair when he made the remark. "Well, father," Mrs. Lincoln replied, "if you like the stand so well, we will take it with us when we go away." "Not for the world," he exclaimed, but she interrupted him. "I should like to know what difference it makes if we put a better one in its place." "That alters the question. If you will put a stand in its place worth twice as much as this one, and the commissioner consents, then I have no objection." Mrs. Lincoln remembered these words, and with the consent of the commissioner, took the stand to Chicago with her for the benefit of little Tad. Another stand, I must not forget to add, was put in its place. It is charged that a great deal of furniture was lost from the White House during Mr. Lincoln's occupation of it. Very true, and it can be accounted for in this way. In some respects, to put the case very plainly, Mrs. Lincoln was penny wise and pound foolish. When she moved into the White House, she discharged the steward, whose business it was to look after the affairs of the household. When the steward was dismissed, there was no one to superintend affairs, and the servants carried away many pieces of furniture. In this manner, the furniture rapidly disappeared. Robert was frequently in the room where the boxes were being packed, and he tried without avail to influence his mother to set fire to her vast stores of old goods. That's what I said earlier. Just burn it all. Burn it all. "What are you going to do with that old dress, mother?" he would ask. "Never mind, Robert. I will find use for it. You do not understand this business. And what is more, I hope I never may understand it. I wish to heaven the car would take fire in which you placed these boxes for transportation to Chicago and burn all of your old plunder up." And then, with an impatient gesture, he would turn on his heel to leave the room. "Robert is so impetuous," his mother would say to me after the closing of the door. "He never thinks about the future. Well, I hope that he will get over his boyish notions in time." Um, I'm gonna stop. Am I gonna stop now? When did we start? How long have we been reading? Uh, it's been what, like 15 minutes? I'm gonna keep going a little bit longer. Nah, I'm gonna stop now. I've lost momentum. Here we go. We're stopping here. We're reading chapter 12 of Behind the Scenes by Elizabeth Keckley. I'm Rashonda Cade, and this is Reading with Rashonda.